Alright, the last spot in the final four will be determined between a battle of number 1, Senko Wacky Rig, and number 3, Mann's Baby 1 Minus Crankbait. This is a matchup, two baits that prove that you should listen to people when they give you some fishing advice. As far as the Mann's Baby 1 Minus, a buddy of mine, Woody, used to work with, and he had some ponds, and he swore by this Mann's Baby 1 Minus. I'd never fished it before, but I thought, you know what, Woody knows what he's talking about. He's got the fish to prove it. Went out and purchased it, and as you can see now, I've got a whole utility box full of them. Awesome crankbait, works just under the surface. As I'd mentioned before, covered a zone that had really not been exploited by a crankbait before. You can fish in some shallow areas, over the top of some vegetation, perfect for farm ponds, that sort of thing. As far as the Senko goes, this is another one. I'd read about it in the magazines and thought that just looks goofy. Finally gave it a try. 2005, been hooked ever since. It's always on the end of one of my poles. You can see here it's rigged. I just get some O-rings, put around like where the egg sac on the worm is, get an octopus hook, thread it through there, and you're off and running. It just has an undulating kind of flopping action as it descends through the water column. There's also some weighted jig heads that I use to get it to sink a little faster in certain applications. There in the middle we got some white Senkos. As far as listening to somebody when they tell you something, now I get to pass it on, teach my son Jace. He really had a good time with those white Senkos there back on Cinco de Mayo last year. We went out and he caught a lot of nice bass with that. So in this matchup, it's going to go hands down to the Senko. And in the vein of listening to somebody when they tell you some fishing advice, I'd certainly advise you to go out, get you some Senkos, and use this Wacky rig. You won't be disappointed.